Part 4. Hello everyone. Today we are going to look at another natural food product, and that is the maple syrup. What is this exactly? Well, maple syrup looks rather like clear honey, but it is not made by bees. It is produced from the plant fluid or sap inside the maple tree, and that makes maple syrup a very natural product. Maple syrup is a thick, golden, sweet tasting liquid that can be bought in bottles or jars and produced onto um, and poured onto food such as waffles, and ice cream, or used in the baking of cakes and pastries. It contains no preservatives or added ingredients, and it provides a healthy alternative to refined sugar. Let's just talk a bit about the maple tree itself, which is when maple syrup comes from, which is where maple syrup comes from. So there are many species of maple tree, and they grow up without fertilizer in areas where there is plenty of moisture in the soil. However, they only do this if another important criterion is fulfilled, which is that they must have a partial, full or partial sun exposure during the day and very cool nights. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. There are only certain parts of the world that provide all these conditions. One is Canada, and by that I mean all parts of Canada, and the other is the northeastern states of North America. In these areas, the climate suits the trees perfectly. In fact, Canada produces over two-thirds of the world's maple syrup, which is why the five-pointed maple leaf is a Canadian symbol and has featured on the flag since 1964. So, how did maple syrup production begin? Well, long before Europeans settled in these parts of the world, the indigenous communities had started producing maple sugar. They bored holes in the trunks of maple trees and used containers made of tree bark and to collect the liquid sap as it poured out. As they were unable to keep the liquid for any length of time, they didn't have storage facilities in those days, and they boiled the liquid by placing pieces of rock that had become scorching hot from the sun into the sap. They did this until it turned into sugar, and they were then able to use this to sweeten their food and drinks. Since that time, improvements have been made to the process, but it has changed very little overall. So let us look at the production of maple syrup today. Clearly, the maple forests are valuable resources in many Canadian and North American communities. The trees have to be well looked after, and they cannot be used to make syrup until the trunks reach a diameter of around 25 centimeters. This can take anything up to 40 years. As I have already mentioned, maple trees need the right conditions to grow and also to produce sap. Why is this? Well, what happens is that during a cold night, the tree absorbs water from the soil, and that rises through the tree's vascular system. But then, in the warmer time, the change in temperature causes the water to be pushed back down onto the bottom of the tree. This continual movement up and down leads to the formation of the sap needed for maple syrup production. When the tree is ready, it can be tapped, and this involves the drilling a small hole into the trunk and inserting a tube into it that ends in a bucket. The trees can often take several taps, and though the workers take care not to cause any damage to the healthy growth of the tree itself. The sap that comes out of the trees consists of 98% water and 2% sugar and other nutrients. It has to be boiled so that much of that water evaporates, and this process has to take place immediately using what are called evaporators. These are basically extremely large pans. The sap is poured into these, a fire is built, and the pans are then heated until the sap boils. As it does this, the water evaporates and the syrup begins to form. The evaporation process creates large quantities of steam, and the sap becomes thicker and denser, and at just the right moment, when the sap is thick enough to be called maple syrup, the worker removes it from the heat. After the process, something called sugar sand has to be filtered out, as this builds up during the boiling and gives the syrup a cloudy appearance and a slightly gritty taste. Once this has been done, the syrup is ready to be packed so that it can be used for a whole variety of products. It takes 40 liters of sap to produce 1 liter of syrup, of maple syrup, and so you can get an idea of how much is needed. So that is the basic process in places which like Quebec, where part 4, questions 31 to 40, complete the notes below. Write one word only for each answer. Maple syrup. What is maple syrup? Made from sap of the maple tree, added into food or used in cooking. Color described as golden, very healthy compared to refined sugar. The maple tree has many species, needs sunny days and cool nights. Maple leaf has been on the Canadian flag since 1964, needs moist soil, but does not need fertilizer as well. Best growing conditions and climate are in Canada and North America. Early maple sugar producers made holes in the tree trunks, used hot rocks to heat their sap, used tree bark to make containers for collection, sweetened food and drink with sugar. Today's maple syrup, the tree trunks may not have the correct diameter until they have been grown for 40 years. The changing temperature and the movement of water within the tree produces the sap. The production. A tap is drilled into the trunk and a tube carries the sap into a bucket. Large pans of sap called evaporators are heated by means of a fire. A lot of steam is produced during the evaporation process. Sugar and sugar sand is removed because it makes the syrup look cloudy and affects the taste. The syrup is ready for use. A huge quality of sap is needed. A huge quantity of sap is needed to make a liter of maple syrup.